My uncle's hand struck my face so hard my ears rang. The guests gasped, then went silent. No one moved. No one dared. I tasted blood. My groom looked away, and my uncle raised his hand again. But before the second blow landed, the doors exploded open, and a voice deeper than thunder growled across the hall. Hit her again, and you won't leave here alive. Every head turned. The ground trembled, and the Alpha King himself walked in. Eyes locked on me like he'd been hunting for me his whole life. Chapter 1, The Longest Walk. The command hung in the vaulted ceiling like smoke. Her uncle's hand, raised to strike, did not lower slowly. It dropped as if the strings holding him up had been severed. He stumbled back against the altar railing, his face draining of color until he resembled the wax candles flickering beside him. The Alpha King did not shout. He did not run. He simply began to walk. Click, click, click. His heavy boots against the marble floor created a rhythm of impending doom. The sound was deafening in the unnatural quiet. Villagers who had spent their lives mocking Alara now scrambled over the wooden pews, desperate to create a wide berth. They pressed themselves into the shadows, eyes wide with primal terror. They smelled the predator in their midst. A scent of ozone, rain, and fresh blood rolled off him in waves, suffocating the stale odor of incense. Alara could not breathe. Her lungs felt paralyzed. She watched the warlord approach, her vision blurring at the edges. Why was he here? The stories said he only left his mountain fortress to conquer or kill. He wasn't looking at the cowering groom or the trembling priest. His violet gaze was pinned to her bruising cheek. It was an anchor in the storm, holding her upright when her knees threatened to buckle. Every step he took cracked the stone beneath him. The air grew hotter, charged with an invisible static that made the hair on her arms stand up. He stopped at the foot of the dais. Up close, he was not a man. He was a force of nature wrapped in black leather and fury. The distance between them vanished. He stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest, burning through her thin, tattered wedding dress. Chapter 2, The Claiming. The Alpha raised a hand. Alara flinched, a reflex carved into her bones after years of abuse. But he did not strike. His rough, calloused fingers brushed against her jawline, ghosting over the purple mark blooming on her skin. A shockwave rattled her teeth. It wasn't pain. It was a collision of souls. A golden thread snapped into place within her chest, binding her ribs to his. Her inner wolf, dormant and silent since childhood, suddenly howled, a soundless cry of recognition that vibrated through her marrow. Mate. The word echoed in her skull, drowning out the terrified whimpers of the guests. The king inhaled sharply. His nostrils flared as he drank in her scent, lilacs and hidden power. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the violet irises until his eyes were bottomless pools of obsidian. Mine. The growl started deep in his torso, vibrating against her skin before ripping from his throat. It was possessive, absolute. The groom let out a high-pitched squeak and scrambled backward, tripping over his own robes in his haste to flee the predator's vicinity. The priest dropped his holy book. The heavy thud sounded like a gavel falling. This was no longer a wedding. It was a conquest. The king did not ask for permission. He did not wait for the council's approval. He simply reached out and wrapped a massive arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. The contact seared her like a brand. For the first time in her life, the cold that had lived in her bones evaporated. She looked up at him, trembling not with fear, but with an terrifying, overwhelming magnetism. He bared his teeth at the room, a silent challenge to anyone foolish enough to intervene. Chapter 3, The Thief in the Shadows. Confusion erupted into pandemonium. The king turned, shielding Alara from the chaotic mass of humanity with his broad back. He lifted her effortlessly, her feet leaving the ground as he cradled her against his chest. She was weightless in his arms. In the periphery of her vision, a movement caught her eye, her uncle. He was not cowering anymore. While the Alpha's attention was focused on securing his prize, the older man was sliding along the back wall toward the vestry exit. He paused for a fraction of a second. His eyes met hers. There was no remorse in his gaze, only a chilling, calculating malice. He tapped his chest pocket. A bulge lay there, the star stone. Alara's blood ran cold. He had stolen the family heirloom, the only artifact capable of suppressing a wolf's spirit. He wasn't fleeing out of fear, he was retreating to regroup. He knew something. He knew why the alpha had come, and he had prepared for it. She opened her mouth to warn the king, to scream that the true danger was slipping away, but the words died in her throat. The alpha marched forward, his guards flanking them in a phalanx of steel and muscle. They burst through the sanctuary doors into the blinding daylight. The fresh air hit her face, crisp and biting. The king did not stop. He strode toward a waiting black SUV, the engine idling like a restrained beast. He placed her inside with surprising care, buckling her in as if she were made of glass. As he slid into the seat beside her, the door slammed shut, sealing them in a private world of leather and tension. The car peeled away, leaving the village and her uncle behind. She was safe, yet as she looked at the man beside her, she realized she had simply traded one cage for another. But this cage was made of fire, and she was terrified she might burn. Chapter 4: The Gilded Cave. The tires crunched over gravel, signaling the end of the journey. Alara peered through the tinted glass. The Alpha King's estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved from the living rock of the mountain. Towering spires pierced the gray clouds, and the scent of pine and wet earth was thick enough to taste. Kale opened her door. The air here was thinner, sharper. He didn't offer his hand this time. He simply waited, his massive frame blocking her escape route. "Welcome home," he murmured. The words sounded less like a greeting and more like a sentence. She stepped out, her legs trembling from the adrenaline crash. Dozens of eyes watched from the ramparts. Warriors. They didn't look at her with reverence, they looked at her with suspicion. She was the stranger, the weakling brought into the lion's den. Kale placed a hand on the small of her back, the heat searing through her dress, guiding her toward the massive iron doors. Inside, the castle was a labyrinth of shadows and luxury. Velvet drapes, obsidian floors, and the constant, low hum of pack energy. He led her to a suite that smelled of lavender and him. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "The council is already convening. They smell your bloodline and they don't like it." He turned to leave but paused at the threshold. His violet eyes softened for a fraction of a second, revealing the man beneath the monster. "Do not leave this room, Alara. There are things in these halls that bite harder than your uncle." The door clicked shut, the heavy lock sliding into place. She was safe from the world, but trapped with a destiny she didn't understand. Chapter 5: The Touch of Life. Solitude was a heavy cloak. 3 hours passed. The silence in the suite grew deafening, broken only by the rhythmic thumping of her own heart. Alara paced the floor, the strange energy in her veins buzzing like a trapped hornet. She couldn't stay still. The lock on the balcony door was flimsy. She slipped out, scaling the stone trellis down to the garden below. She needed air. She found death instead. Near the perimeter wall, a young guard lay gasping in the dirt, his chest shredded by a rogue grizzly. His breathing was wet, rattling. Blood soaked the moss, turning it black in the moonlight. Panic seized her. She should run, she should call for help. But her feet moved on their own, drawn to the dying boy. She knelt, her hands hovering over the ruin of his ribcage. Instinct took the wheel. She didn't think, she just felt. A golden light ignited beneath her skin. It wasn't visual, it was a sensation, like liquid sunshine pouring from her palms. She pressed her hands to the wound. The guard arched his back, a silent scream caught in his throat, the flesh knitted together. Bones snapped back into place. The scent of copper faded, replaced by the smell of ozone. Alara yanked her hands back, gasping as if she had been underwater. The boy's eyes flew open, clear and terrified. He looked at his healed chest, then at her. "Healer," he whispered, the word laced with reverence and horror. Alara scrambled back into the shadows. Resurrection was a myth, a heresy. If the council found out she could cheat death, they wouldn't just kill her. They would dissect her. She fled back to her room, her hands still trembling, glowing faintly in the dark. Chapter 6: The Blood Moon Rising. Nightfall brought pain. It started as a dull ache in her chest and bloomed into a fever that set her blood on fire. The mating bond. It demanded completion. Kale returned to the room, looking exhausted. He tossed his jacket onto a chair, the leather creaking. He smelled of council smoke and frustration. When he saw her huddled on the bed, shivering, his expression hardened. "It's beginning," he said, his voice rough. He sat on the edge of the mattress. The mattress dipped under his weight. The bond is a living thing, Alara. If we deny it, it will consume us both. You will burn with fever until your heart gives out. He reached out, brushing a stray hair from her damp forehead. His touch was cool relief against her burning skin. I can stop the pain, but you have to choose me. Alara looked into his violet eyes. They weren't demanding submission, they were pleading for survival. But before she could answer, a siren wailed through the castle. High-pitched, urgent. The door burst open. A lieutenant stood there, breathless. My king, the barrier has been breached. They found the artifact signature inside the perimeter. Hale snarled, the sound ripping through the room. Stay, he ordered Alara, his eyes flashing feral. He stormed out, the beast taking over. Alara clutched her chest. Her uncle hadn't just escaped, he was here. And he had the star stone. The fever spiked, blurring her vision. She realized with terrifying clarity that she couldn't stay in this room. If the artifact got close to Cale while he was enraged, it wouldn't just hurt him. It would turn the protector into the destroyer. She forced her legs to move. She had to find him first. Chapter 7, The Unchained Monster. The sirens slashed through the night air, a jagged ribbon of sound that vibrated in Alara's molars. She ran barefoot down the obsidian corridor, the stone biting into her soles. Fear was a cold stone in her gut, but the pull of the bond was a hook in her navel, dragging her toward the chaos. She burst into the courtyard. It was a slaughterhouse. Bodies of rogue wolves littered the cobblestones, broken and steaming in the cool air. In the center of the carnage stood Cale. He was not the man who had touched her cheek in the bedroom. He was a calamity. His shirt was shredded, revealing skin that rippled with shadowy fur. His claws, long as daggers, dripped with crimson evidence. He held a rogue by the throat, lifting the 300-pound beast as if he were made of straw. Alara froze behind a pillar. She watched, horrified, as Cale's jaw unhinged, a guttural roar shaking the foundations of the castle. Violet energy crackled around him, arching like lightning. It wasn't just rage, it was corruption. His eyes were glowing so bright they looked like dying stars. He snapped the rogue's neck. The sound was a wet branch breaking. He threw the corpse aside and spun around, his nostrils flaring. He smelled her. Alara! The name came out as a snarl. He didn't look at her with recognition, he looked at her with hunger. The man was gone. The beast was driving. He took a step toward her, the stone cracking under his weight. For the first time, she realized the lock on her door hadn't been to keep her in. It was to keep him out. She backed away, but her heel caught on a loose paver. She stumbled. The monster lunged. Chapter 8, The Forbidden Spark. Cale stopped inches from her face. His chest heaved, a furnace blasting heat against her skin. The violet fire in his eyes flickered, warring with the obsidian darkness of his pupil. He was fighting himself. A vein throbbed in his temple. Slowly, painfully, he retracted his claws. The feral energy receded, leaving him swaying on his feet, sweat dripping from his chin. I told you to stay, he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. Before she could answer, a low whine drifted from the shadows. One of the castle guards, a young female, dragged herself across the stones. A deep gash ruined her abdomen. The scent of death was acrid, undeniable. Cale turned, his face hardening into a mask of resignation. He knew she wouldn't survive, but Alara felt that familiar, dangerous hum in her palms. She pushed past the king. Don't, Cale warned, grabbing her wrist. His grip was bruising. If the council sees. She's dying, Alara hissed, yanking her arm free. The defiance surprised them both. She fell to her knees beside the wounded wolf. The girl's eyes were glassy, fixed on a moon she would never see again. Alara didn't hesitate. She placed her hands on the wet fur. She visualized the wound knitting, the blood replenishing. The golden light erupted, brighter this time, illuminating the courtyard like a solar flare. The flesh stitched itself together in seconds. The guard gasped, air rushing into healed lungs. Alara slumped back, exhausted. Silence fell, heavier than the stone walls. She looked up. Cale was staring at her, but the anger was gone. In its place was terrified awe. He knelt, grabbing her face between his palms. Do you have any idea what you are? He whispered. You are a ghost story, and they will hunt you for it. Chapter 9, The Silvered Blade. The warning barely left his lips before the shadows moved. Not the natural darkness of night, but a shifting, liquid gloom that detached itself from the castle wall. An assassin. He didn't make a sound. No heartbeat. No scent. Just a void in the air where a person should be. Ilara saw the glint of metal first. Kale. The king spun, shoving her behind him. A throwing knife, forged of pure silver and etched with runes, whistled through the space where her heart had been a second ago. It embedded itself in Kale's shoulder. Sizzling flesh. Smoke. He didn't scream, but a low grunt of agony escaped him. Silver didn't just hurt alphas, it poisoned them. The assassin lunged, a blur of black cloth and steel. Kale, hampered by the toxins flooding his veins, was a second too slow. He blocked a strike meant for his throat, but the blade sliced his forearm. Ilara scrambled backward, searching for a weapon. Her hand closed around a discarded spear. "Get back," Kale roared, kicking the assailant in the chest. The attacker flew backward but landed on his feet like a cat. He wasn't trying to win. He was stalling. The assassin pulled a glass vial from his belt and smashed it on the ground. Purple mist exploded outward. Wolfsbane, concentrated and weaponized. Kale coughed, falling to one knee as his strength evaporated. The assassin turned his faceless mask toward Ilara. He didn't want the king. He wanted the healer. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her uncle hadn't just sent a killer, he had sent a retrieval team. She raised the spear, her hands shaking as the killer stepped through the mist. She was done hiding. If he wanted her, he would have to bleed for it. The hunt is just beginning. If you're hooked on Kale and Ilara's story, tap the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Chapter 10, The Spear of Defiance. The assassin vanished into the night, leaving behind a swirl of purple mist and a poisoned king. Ilara stood her ground. Her knuckles turned white around the spear shaft. She did not chase the killer. Her priority lay panting on the cobblestones. Kale tried to rise, but his limbs failed him. The wolfsbane was doing its work, paralyzing the most powerful creature in the kingdom. Heavy doors slammed open. Torches flooded the courtyard. The council had arrived. 5 elders in crimson robes marched toward them. They did not look like rescuers. They looked like vultures circling a dying carcass. The lead elder, a gray-haired wolf with eyes like flint, sneered at the prostrate king. He did not offer a hand. He merely signaled his guards to surround them. They weren't securing the perimeter against assassins. They were containing Kale. "The beast weakens," the elder spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is what happens when you bring a stray bitch into the royal line." Ilara stepped in front of Kale. She pointed the spear tip at the elder's chest. The audacity of the move stunned the courtyard into silence. A human threatening a lichen elder was a death sentence. She did not care. The heat in her blood, the healer's fire, had turned into a warrior's cold rage. "Touch him and you bleed," Ilara said. Her voice was steady, devoid of the fear that should have crippled her. The elder laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "You think you can stop us, girl? You are the disease rotting him from the inside." He gestured to the guards. "Take the king to the isolation cells. Throw the girl in the dungeon. We will decide her fate in the morning." Chapter 11, The Cursed Lineage. The dungeon was damp, smelling of rust and despair, but they hadn't held her long. Kale had broken free of the isolation ward the moment the wolfsbane wore off, tearing through 3 steel doors to get to her. Now they stood in his private war room, the map of the territory spread out between them. The air was thick with unsaid words. Kale looked haggard. The silver wound on his shoulder was black, refusing to heal fully. "He contacted me," Kale said, his voice a low rumble. He threw a communication device onto the table. It crackled to life. Her uncle's voice filled the room, smooth and terrifyingly calm. It wasn't a threat. It was a lesson. "You wonder why I took the star stone, niece? You think it is just a rock." The recording paused, letting the silence stretch. "The stone is a prison for wolf spirits, but it needs a key to lock the door. A battery." Ilara felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the edge of the table. "Your blood," the voice continued. "The healer's blood doesn't just give life. It binds it. My dear sister, your mother, hid you because you are a living amplifier. If I feed your blood to the stone, I don't just suppress the Alpha King. I corrupt him. I turn his own power into a cancer." The transmission ended. Kale stared at her. The revelation hung between them like a physical barrier. She wasn't just his mate. She was the weapon designed to destroy him. Her uncle didn't want to kill Cale. He wanted to turn Cale into a mindless beast, and he needed Alara's essence to do it. Chapter 12, Fractured Soul. "Get out," Cale whispered. Alara froze. The rejection stung worse than the slap at the wedding. She reached for him, but he recoiled as if she were made of acid. "Did you hear him?" Cale roared, slamming his fist onto the table. The wood split down the middle. "Your presence here puts a target on my back. If he gets you, he ends me." "I am not leaving you," she countered, stepping closer to the blast radius of his anger. Suddenly, Cale grabbed his head. A groan of pure agony ripped from his throat. His knees hit the floor. The air in the room temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. Shadows pooled around his feet, twisting like living snakes. The corruption, it was starting. Her uncle must have activated the stone remotely, testing the link. Cale looked up. His violet eyes were gone. In their place swirled a sickly, radioactive green, the color of rot. "Run," the thing that used to be Cale hissed. He lunged. It wasn't a lover's embrace. It was a predator's strike. Alara dove to the side, crashing into a bookshelf. Cale's claws gouged deep furrows into the stone wall where her head had been a second ago. He turned, saliva dripping from his jaws. There was no recognition in his face, only a mindless, driving need to kill. Alara scrambled toward the heavy iron door. She fumbled with the latch, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wasn't running to save herself. She was running to save him from the guilt of killing his mate. She burst into the hallway and slammed the bolt home, just as a heavy body impacted the metal from the other side. Chapter 13, The Anchor. The iron door shuddered against the bolt. On the other side, the thing that wore Cale's face threw itself against the metal with the force of a battering ram. Alara pressed her back against the cold steel. The vibrations traveled through her spine, rattling her teeth. Fear told her to run. Logic told her to flee. But her heart, that traitorous organ, anchored her feet to the stone floor. Her uncle had lied. He claimed her blood was a battery for the corruption. But as she listened to the mindless snarling, she realized the truth. Her blood wasn't the fuel. It was the conductor. A conductor could carry poison, yes, but it could also carry the antidote. If she ran now, the corruption would consume Cale until nothing remained but a hollow shell. She reached for the latch. Her fingers trembled but did not falter. She slid the bolt back. The door flew open. Cale stood in the center of the wrecked war room. His skin was gray, veins pulsing with that sickly green light. He roared, a sound of pure agony, and charged. Alara did not flinch. She did not raise a weapon. She raised her hand. She stepped into his path, placing her palm directly over his racing heart. "Come back," she commanded. It wasn't a plea. It was an order from a queen. The golden light of the healer surged from her core, crashing into the green rot like a tidal wave. Cale froze. The green fire in his eyes flickered, warring with the violet. He convulsed, his claws stopping inches from her throat. He fell to his knees, gasping for air as if he had just surfaced from a deep, dark ocean. The monster receded. The man returned. Chapter 14, The Cold Distance. Cale knelt on the broken stone, his chest heaving. Sweat dripped from his nose, hitting the floor with soft, wet taps. He looked at his hands, then at Alara. Horror washed over his features. He scrambled backward, putting the ruins of the table between them. "Do not touch me," he rasped. His voice was a ruin of broken glass. Alara took a step forward, but he snarled. It wasn't an aggressive sound. It was a warning shot. "I almost killed you. Another second and I would have ripped your throat out." He stood up unsteady, leaning against the wall for support. "Your uncle is right. You are the trigger. As long as you are near me, he can use that stone to pull my strings." "He is wrong," Alara said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. "I am not the trigger, I am the tether. I pulled you back, Cale. No one else could have done that." He looked at her, anguish etched into every line of his face. He wanted to believe her. She could see the longing in his eyes, the desperate need to close the distance. But the fear of hurting her was stronger. He turned away, staring out the window at the moonlit forest. "Pack your things. I am sending you to the Northern Territories. You will be safe there." "I am not going anywhere," she stated. She walked around the debris, forcing him to look at her. "The council is coming for you. The assassin is still out there. If I leave, you die, and I will not let that happen." Cale closed his eyes. A single tear tracked through the grime on his cheek. He knew she was right, and it terrified him. Chapter 15. The Lethal Trap. The argument died before it could escalate. A pulse of energy rocked the castle foundation. It wasn't an explosion. It was a magnetic pull, deep and sickening, tugging at the marrow of their bones. Cale doubled over, clutching his chest. The veins in his neck bulged, flashing green again. "He is here," Cale groaned through gritted teeth. Alara ran to the window. In the valley below, a beam of unnatural light pierced the night sky. It originated from the old ruins of the watchtower, a mile from the estate. Her uncle wasn't hiding anymore. He had planted the star stone and turned it on. He was broadcasting a signal designed to drive every wolf in a 10-mile radius insane. He is accelerating the process, Alara realized. She watched the guards on the wall stumble, clutching their heads. The chaos was spreading. If that stone stayed active for another hour, Cale wouldn't just turn. He would burn out. His heart would explode from the strain. She turned back to the king. He was fighting the transformation, his muscles locking up as he battled for control. He couldn't fight this enemy. He couldn't even get close to the tower without losing his mind. That meant only one person could walk into that tower and survive. Alara grabbed a dagger from the weapon rack. It felt heavy and cold in her hand. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a killer. But she was the only thing standing between Cale and oblivion. She looked at him one last time, memorizing the line of his jaw, the color of his eyes. He was too weak to stop her. She slipped out of the room into the hallway and ran toward the darkness. She was going to hunt the hunter. Chapter 16. The Broken Leash. The forest floor was a minefield of slick roots and rotting leaves. Alara scrambled up the ridge, her breath tearing at her throat like sandpaper. Behind her, the castle was no longer a sanctuary. It was a tomb. A roar shattered the night, louder than thunder, deeper than the earth itself. It wasn't the call of a king. It was the scream of a creature tearing itself apart. Cale had broken loose. The ground vibrated. Trees snapped like matchsticks in the distance, marking his path. He wasn't tracking the enemy. He was hunting anything with a heartbeat. The star stone's signal had erased his mind, leaving only a vessel of pure, destructive instinct. Alara slid behind a massive oak, pressing her hand over her mouth. Tears blurred her vision. She had failed. She hadn't reached the tower in time. Shadow fell over her hiding spot. The air turned rancid, smelling of sulfur and wet fur. She looked up. Perched on a boulder 10 feet above her was the beast. His fur was matted with black veins, his eyes glowing with that radioactive, sickly green. He looked down at her. There was no love in that gaze, no recognition. Just the cold, calculating look of a predator finding a rabbit. He crouched, muscles coiling for the kill. The bond between them went silent, severed by the corruption. She was alone. Chapter 17. Blood on the Snow. The beast launched himself from the rock. Alara squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the impact. "Move." A heavy body slammed into her, knocking her sideways into the brush. She rolled, gasping, as a spray of hot blood coated her face. It wasn't hers. Cale's lieutenant, the gray-haired warrior who had guarded her door, stood between her and the monster. He held a silver-tipped spear, but his hands were shaking. He wasn't facing an enemy, he was facing his king. "Run, Luna," the lieutenant screamed, swinging the weapon. The beast didn't even slow down. He caught the spear shaft in one massive paw and snapped it. With a backhand strike that moved faster than sight, he sent the loyal soldier flying into a tree trunk. The crack of bone was sickeningly loud. The lieutenant crumpled, his chest caved in. He didn't rise. Cale roared again, a sound of triumph, and turned back to Alara. He had just killed his own pack mate. The final barrier of his humanity was gone. Alara scrambled backward, her heels digging into the mud. She couldn't save him. Not like this. If she stayed, she died, and her uncle won. Sobbing, she forced herself to turn and sprint into the darkness, leaving the broken body of her protector behind. Chapter 18. The Hollow Heart. Alara collapsed into a shallow ravine, her body giving out before her mind did. The rain began to fall, icy sheets that soaked through her dress, chilling her to the marrow. She pulled her knees to her chest, shivering violently. Above, on the ridge, the sounds of destruction continued. Trees falling, rocks shattering, the mindless howling of a god gone mad. She checked the bond. Nothing. Just a gaping, bleeding hole in her soul where Cale used to be. He was gone. Her uncle had succeeded. The Alpha King was nothing more than a biological weapon now, destroying his own kingdom. Despair, heavy and black, settled over her shoulders. She was just a girl, a healer who couldn't heal this, a mate who had failed. "Give up," a voice whispered in her head. It sounded like her groom, like the villagers, like her uncle. She looked at her hands. They were covered in mud and the lieutenant's blood. She wiped them on the grass, but the stain remained. Then she felt it, a faint pulse, not from the bond, but from the earth itself, from her own veins. The healer's fire hadn't gone out. It was just buried under the fear. She wasn't just a girl. She was the only thing on this mountain that wasn't afraid of death. The despair hardened into something cold and sharp. She stood up. She would not weep for Cale. She would save him, or she would die dragging him back from hell. Chapter 19, The Living Antidote. Elara pressed her hand against the muddy bank of the ravine. She closed her eyes, seeking the spark that had healed the wolf pup, the guard, the dying. It was there. A hum, a vibration. But it was different now. It wasn't just a flicker, it was a roaring furnace fueled by her grief and rage. A withered vine, choked by the necrotic energy of the star stone, lay near her fingers. It was black, dead. She pushed her energy into it. Not a gentle stream, but a violent surge. Snap. Life exploded from the dead wood. Green leaves burst forth in seconds, spiraling up the rock face, glowing with an ethereal bioluminescence. The corruption didn't just retreat, it was incinerated. Elara pulled her hand back, gasping. Her uncle had called her a battery. He was wrong. She wasn't a battery for his machine. She was the surge that would fry its circuits. The star stone consumed soul energy. She created it. She was the natural predator of his artifact. She stood up. The rain washed the mud from her face. She didn't need a weapon. She didn't need an army. She was the cure. She turned her gaze toward the watchtower where the beam of green light pierced the clouds. Cale was out there, a prisoner in his own body, waiting for salvation. She began to climb out of the ravine. She was coming for him. Chapter 20, The Ascent. The watchtower loomed like a jagged tooth against the storm. Green lightning arched from its spire, grounding itself in the forest below. Every strike made the earth scream. Elara moved through the undergrowth. She did not hide. She did not crouch. The sheer volume of life energy radiating from her skin acted as a shield. The corruption in the air tried to latch onto her, to drain her, but it burned away upon contact. 2 rogue wolves guarded the base of the tower. They were half-mad, drooling, their eyes spinning with the stone's influence. They smelled her. They turned to attack. Elara didn't flinch. She extended her hands. Sleep. A pulse of pure white light expanded from her palms. It washed over the wolves. They didn't die. The madness simply evaporated from their eyes, replaced by sudden, overwhelming exhaustion. They collapsed into the mud, unconscious before they hit the ground. She stepped over their sleeping forms. She reached the iron door of the tower. It was locked, rusted shut by centuries of neglect. She placed her palm on the lock. The metal groaned, heated, and then shattered, unable to withstand the frequency of her power. She pushed the door open and started up the spiral stairs. Chapter 21, The Kill Box. The top of the tower was open to the sky. The wind howled, carrying the scent of ozone and triumph. Her uncle stood by the pedestal, his hands hovering over the pulsating star stone. He looked manic. His hair was wild, his eyes wide with the drug of absolute power. "You," he laughed. The sound was thin and sharp. "I knew you would come. The moth always finds the flame." Elara stepped onto the platform. The green light was blinding here, but she pushed through it, a silhouette of white fire. "Turn it off," she said. "And miss the finale," her uncle grinned. He slammed his fist down on the stone. "I don't need to hunt you, niece. I just need to ring the dinner bell." The stone shrieked. A shockwave blasted outward, knocking Elara to her knees. From the stairwell behind her, a shadow emerged, massive, terrifying. The beast pulled himself onto the roof. Cale, but there was nothing left of the king in those eyes. They were solid green voids. He looked at the uncle, then at Alara. "Kill her," the uncle commanded. The beast roared, shaking the stones of the tower, and charged. Alara stood up. She had nowhere to run. The edge of the tower was behind her. The monster was in front of her. This was the moment. She didn't raise her hands to fight. She opened her arms to embrace the impact. Chapter 22. The Collision of Souls. The impact should have broken her bones. Instead, Alara caught the charging monster. She didn't use strength. She used gravity and light. As Kale's massive weight slammed into her, she drove her palms directly into the center of his chest. Light detonated. It was blinding, silent, and absolute. The white fire of the healer met the green rod of the star stone. The reaction was violent. Kale howled, a sound that started as a beast's roar and ended as a man's scream. The corruption hissed like steam hitting ice. Alara held on. Her skin blistered from the necrotic energy, but she poured everything she had into the bond. She pushed past the madness, past the wolf, searching for the man buried beneath the sludge. "Wake up," she gritted out, her voice vibrating through his ribcage. The green light in Kale's eyes flickered. It strobed once, twice, and then shattered. The obsidian pupils returned. The violet iris reclaimed its throne. The fur receded, melting back into skin. Kale collapsed forward, his head resting on her shoulder, his heavy breathing the only sound on the roof. He was back. The leash was cut. Alara fell to her knees, dragging him down with her, her hands still glowing with the aftershocks of the miracle. Chapter 23. The King's Justice. Impossible. The uncle's voice trembled. He backed away from the pedestal, clutching the star stone as if it could save him. It couldn't. The artifact was dark, its energy spent, drained by Alara's countersurge. Kale lifted his head. He didn't look at Alara. He looked at the man who had turned him into a weapon. The king stood up. He moved slowly, his body stiff from the transformation, but his eyes were clear. And they were burning with cold, calculated murder. "You wanted a beast," Kale said, his voice a low rumble of thunder. "You got one." "Wait," the uncle stammered, raising a hand. "I can explain the council. They forced me." Kale didn't listen. He crossed the distance in a blur of motion. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He grabbed the uncle by the throat and lifted him off the ground. The older man clawed at Kale's wrist, his legs kicking uselessly over the abyss of the drop. "You touched my mate," Kale stated. It was the only verdict that mattered. He squeezed. There was a wet crunch. The uncle went limp. Kale didn't drop the body. He threw it. The traitor sailed over the edge of the tower, plummeting into the dark forest below. Kale turned back to the pedestal. He raised a fist and brought it down on the star stone. The ancient artifact shattered into dust. The green light vanished forever. Chapter 24. The Dawn of the Luna. Silence reclaimed the mountain. The storm clouds broke, allowing the first gray light of dawn to bleed across the horizon. Alara sat against the parapet, too exhausted to move. Her hands were burned, her dress ruined, but her heart beat with a steady, powerful rhythm. Kale walked toward her. He knelt on the wet stones. He didn't touch her at first. He looked at her as if she were a deity he didn't deserve to worship. "You saved me," he whispered. "I tried to kill you, and you saved me." "You would have done the same," Alara replied, her voice hoarse. He reached out, taking her damaged hands in his. He kissed the burns, his lips cool and gentle. "No, I would have destroyed the world. You healed it." He stood, pulling her up with him. He didn't lead her to the stairs. He walked her to the edge of the tower, overlooking the estate, the village, and the forest. Below, the wolves were waking up, the madness lifting with the rising sun. They looked up and saw two silhouettes against the morning light, the Alpha King, and the woman who had tamed his darkness. Kale placed a hand on the back of her neck, marking her, claiming her, submitting to her. "Long live the Luna," he roared to the valley. 1,000 howls answered him. The reign of the healer had begun. "The Alpha and Luna have found their peace, but I want to know about you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and tell me, which moment hit you the hardest? Was it the wedding or the final battle? Hit subscribe to join the pack, and I'll see you in the next story.